You're listening to the Fan Club Podcast, where two polar opposites discover each other's fandoms for the very first time. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Fan Club Podcast. My name is Sarah.
This is Matthew.
And today is episode 35, and we are joined by our special guests again today. Say hello.
Hi, it's Frances again.
And you got Kate.
So today we are covering the last two episodes of Loki. What are your initial thoughts before we jump into the play-by-play?
So, Frances last time said that episode 3 was her favorite. Episode 5 is my favorite. I think it has so many visuals in it that really do feed the people who know the Easter eggs. And ultimately, I think that the last scene in it is so important in the whole grand scheme of this whole thing that really just is the reason why I love it so much. If we're talking about just episode 5, that's kind of my baby in a way.
I think 5 is like such an interesting episode. Like, I know we've already mentioned that WandaVision is unlike anything else in the MCU. And I feel like episode 5 of Loki kind of is in that same vein. It's unlike anywhere that we've seen so far in the MCU. I know at one point, and it's Nightmare Fuel, I'll have to find the tweet and send it to you, Sarah. Kate Herron, the director of Loki, was like, so I wanted the Void to be like an apocalyptic wasteland that reminded you of the Teletubbies. And last year after this episode, the Teletubbies tweeted to Loki and said, "Nice to meet you." And it was like one of the Teletubbies with Loki horns. And I was like, this is Nightmare Fuel.
I'm sorry, I feel like that the woman was too stunned to speak meme.
Yeah.
I love 5 just because of all the Easter eggs in it.
There's a ton.
Everything. There's something from every single comic arc. The Dark Ether ship, the Kree ship, all the way to a giant Yellow Jacket helmet, to Frog Thor.
Voiced by Chris Hemsworth.
The Thanos copter is the one I love.
What I really appreciate about all of the MCU shows thus far is they are so different and also different from each other. It's not more of the same. Like, Falcon is a little bit, like, much more in the vein of, like, the regular MCU stuff. Mm-hmm. It definitely feels like the extension of its own.
The Captain America movie.
These TV shows starting to succeed. You loving WandaVision, Matt loving Falcon Winter Soldier, and Frances loving Loki. Like, I just think that kind of shows that that's just, like, they have started to reach more people than they previously had. The one thing I would like to challenge of what you said is that Falcon Winter Soldier, when Wyatt Russell murders someone, feels nothing like any Marvel thing I've ever felt in my entire life. So
I think that is the one exception.
Yeah.
That's what I actually think. This felt more like Marvel.
I think I say this in the finale of I think it's in the finale episode of Winter Soldier, our Winter Soldier episodes. The things that John Walker as a character does is a slap in the face to Captain America and what Steve Rogers stood for as a person. And so that could not be farther from the Captain America that we learned to know. Mm-hmm. I even make a "How dare you stand where he stood" reference in that episode. So.
Nice. No, but that's like the only thing I'd say is that this felt actually very Marvel-y to me because of all those Easter eggs that Matthew was saying. And then at the same point, like, if you hadn't consumed this all really quick, Sarah, I think that you would have enjoyed this a little bit more, only because you kind of, at least when you watch this episode by episode, and so eventually when y'all catch up and you're watching something new, I imagine you will be priming yourself to be an Easter egg hunter, as similar to someone who listens to a new Taylor Swift album and wants to hear her Easter eggs. It's that same level of, like, passion, because then you're already on the joke.
I can't wait for in 2,000 years when I'm finally watching things for the first time with everybody else. That's kind of how it feels. Like, it's going to be forever.
You're pretty close. There's a light at the end of the tunnel for you right now.
Next year.
May
of next year.
We started this podcast in May.
May 3rd.
The trajectory should be that we should be caught up with everybody else by May of 2023.
Yes.
If we don't miss a week.
You'll get to see Quantumania in theaters, probably.
Yeah. Throg reaching for Mjolnir And once the frog version of Thor touches Mjolnir, he'll go back to being Thor. And he's just inches from it.
They got Chris Hemsworth to be the voice of Throg. I think that's so funny.
I think my favorite is Alligator Loki, to be honest, if we think about even just this opening scene.
I'm an Alligator Loki stan.
It was such a moment where even people were like, wait, was that an alligator? Like, it was such a question mark still, and it was like, was it an alligator Loki, or is it a pet, or something along those lines? And I just love how he has his own little swimming pool. Like, he is so important throughout this whole episode. Alligator Loki is a hero.
I'm a big fan of, in movies, and Disney's probably arguably the most famous for it, but the quirky sidekicks. So the Groots, the
Groot is not a sidekick.
Anyway, episode 5 of Loki is called Journey into Mystery,
which is the comic arc name of the one that's mainly about Thor and Loki.
It opens with Loki waking up in the void, and he comes across, is it Eliath is what it's called?
Yeah.
Which straight up reminds me of the Cave of Wonders from Aladdin.
Ooh, I hadn't thought about that. It just reminded me of a less creepy, whatever that cloud monster's name is in Neverending Story.
I second the Aladdin callback. That was what I thought too. I was like, that's the same shape.
It turns into that same shape, and it roars in a way that reminds me of the "How dare you disturb my slumber."
I love that.
The light eyes too, and the eyes. They were glowing eyes too.
That was my immediate thought. Was this is the Cave of Wonders? Like, are they gonna have to go into it to get some treasure or something?
They do.
But no.
I mean, we'll get there.
So I found the thing about the Journey. So in 1962, Journey of Mysteries, episode 83, is how they introduced Thor. And they introduced Kid Loki also at the same time, where they went to the future with a Tim pad to 2011. And that's when Kid Loki killed Thor. Was in that arc also.
So Renslayer explains that the void is the point at the end of time in which everyone who is pruned basically is destined to go.
Right. No, but I'm saying at the same, it's not Renslayer is narrating this for Loki in the void.
Yes.
At the same time she's explaining that in a way to Sylvie, who has her.
The scenes are intercut with each other.
Yeah.
I should have clarified that. Sorry.
And we do see the Avengers Tower in it also.
Yeah.
But under a different name of QENG, which is owned by Kang the Conqueror in the future. Kang bought it in an issue from Tony Stark in a 2015 issue, and his company was Quang, I guess that's how you pronounce it, but Enterprises, called by Mr. Griffin. Or Griffon.
Yeah.
And then Loki comes across all of the variants, including Alligator Loki.
Or 3 of the variants.
So we get Classic Loki, Alligator Loki, and Kid Loki. And
then
Boastful
Loki. Is it Boastful?
And then Boastful.
And Boastful Loki.
Is that the guy with the fur collar?
Yep. It's Black Loki, let's be honest, too.
His Mjolnir is not really Mjolnir. It's made out of railroad ties.
And we learned that the kid killed Thor.
Yes.
That was his next
Which is why he became a variant.
And if we go to Kid Loki's lair, that is made up of a bunch of random stuff. It kind of looks like a bowling alley a little bit.
Yeah, it's like an arcade.
In this place, there's 2 that I remember. One was there was Rocks on Wine, or
Rocks Cart
Wine, and there was a High C with Ghostbusters on it from the 1980s.
Which is a real true drink that we all miss. That actually was born. If you were actually born around that time.
We were born in 94.
It was definitely in Lunchables at some point, I feel like.
Yeah.
It went through it was either still on the shelves in dollar stores, so if you were still broke and all that stuff, you found it, but it's a one that people love.
So there's a scene with Renslayer and Sylvie, and Renslayer's having Miss Minutes pull up some archives. And this is where I started I was like, so Miss Minutes does whoever is kind of telling her what to do.
He who remains is
She's a little evil.
Are all of the little characters evil to you?
No. Baby Yoda's evil, just so everyone remembers from the last episode. He's evil because he literally eats... he literally eats almost the entirety of an entire generation or last of their kind, the babies. He just decides to eat them like eggs, okay? Come on.
He's a growing boy and Mando doesn't feed him.
He's not a grown boy.
Anywho,
He's 50 years old.
Miss Minutes, though, it is the fact that she is prone to lying, actually. That is the thing to me where it's like, how can we trust her if she has this... She kind of gives off that whole, like if you've ever seen, like, Get Out, right? Like, she has that aspect to her that's almost too nice, where it's just like, something's wrong here. Like, how can we trust this whole thing if Miss Minutes is not rooted in evil? Because she's like, hi, y'all, like, that kind of thing. Like, oh, I'm so disarming. And it's like, no, you're not. You are trying to manipulate all of us to think you are, but you're really running this whole show.
So my big takeaway in this scene specifically, one, is that Miss Minutes may be evil, but also that Renslayer is like stalling to try to.
I don't think she's as in the dark as she pretends to be. I feel like she knows exactly what she's doing and who she reports to. I do think there are some aspects of her job that are unclear because she's not at the top and the person at the top's not going to tell everyone everything because they need to still be able to manipulate people. But I think she knows a lot more than she lets on.
I think she is he who remains his daughter, in my honest opinion.
Oh.
Who?
That was absolutely not what I thought you were going to say.
Renslayer, I think, is his daughter.
I like it, though. I mean, he's Reed Richards' son, right? Or great-grandson or something. So he has the genetic ability to reproduce, probably, and create an equally...
Why does Reed Richards sound like a familiar name?
Mr. Fantastic.
Oh, is that, what's his face? John Krasinski, isn't he?
It's John Krasinski, yes, it is.
I just know that Gugu Mbatha-Raw, I believe is how you say her name, the actress playing Ravonna Renslayer, she is so good. Like,
okay, so I did not make the connection.
But you also hate her. I
did not make the connection until I saw the credits on one. I can't remember which Loki episode that it is, but Gugu is the feather duster in Beauty and the Beast.
Yes.
The live action.
Yeah.
I did not make that connection.
Sylvie does the Spanish dubbing.
Whoa, that's cool.
And speaking of Sylvie, she prunes herself.
Because she realizes that, that they're stalling, right?
Yeah.
Well, and she probably figures they're going to prune her anyway, so she might as well have some agency. What were you telling me, Frances, the other day about her costume?
Oh my God. So the costume producer, designer, that's the word I'm looking for. I believe her name is Christine Wada. She, one, made all these incredible costumes for the entire show, but Sophia DiMartino, who plays Sylvie, had given birth a couple of weeks before they started filming and was still breastfeeding. And so instead, like, obviously you can see her costume is very layered. So in the main, like, catsuit layer, Christine Wada put zippers over the chest so that Sophia DiMartino didn't have to, like, completely get out of this entire costume to pump while she was on set. And so she would just have to take off kind of, like, she just had to take off, like, the top vest part, and then she could have easy access to do her motherly duties, which is just, like, such a cool thing to do. And it, like, I mean, we've all, at this point, we've all seen the Marvel movies. These costumes are very detailed and specific. Exactly. And so for a costume designer to take that into account for the lead actress of this show and say, you know what, we're going to make this really easy on you because you're already doing double duty as a working actress and a mom. We're going to make this, 10 times easier for you when you need to go pump and take your breaks. All you have to do is take the vest off. You don't have to get out of this entire costume. And I just, like, that's one of the coolest things that I learned from the show. And I think everyone would hope that if you were an actor, you would have a costume designer that would take that into account for you.
I guess with Marvel's budget, they'd be stupid not to.
Right.
I mean, they could always recast, though, right? Like, she was an unknown going into this for the most part. Like, not in at least Marvel world. So it also makes it where that's also respect for the character. And I think she was pregnant after this season, right?
Yeah. In the meantime, she's had another child.
And so, but it's also like they knew that they weren't going to be able to start recording the second season. Sorry if this is a spoiler. I guess we're in the last 2 episodes. So yeah, she somehow makes it into the next season. And so they've called out though that they're going to wait for her to, or at the time they were going to wait and start filming afterwards.
Loki comes out of the lair to find all of the various variants,
including President Loki, who is easily the most funny
and one of the hottest.
So I literally the only frame of reference that I had at all for this entire show is one random screenshot of President Loki.
Everyone has that one.
I didn't know, obviously I didn't know what it was, but I was like, okay, odd costume choice.
I'm guessing that's the Loki who won in 2012. I'm guessing.
That's what I've heard from podcasts.
Okay.
Because that would make sense.
Yep.
That would be a Nexus event, yes.
Go ahead.
The important thing, though, is that he still also got pruned. And you just think about this whole thing. The concept is that, like, they only pruned the person that didn't follow the rules and, like, didn't pull the number and all that kind of stuff. So, like, kind of just wonder that kind of aspect of this whole thing, too.
President Loki throwing a hissy fit for being told to do something.
Yeah.
I could see President Loki saying, no, I'm a president. I'm not doing it as you're told, and just gets screwed right there.
I don't know how Alligator Loki was supposed to pull a number, to be honest. That's the one I want to know.
He can get on his hind legs. I've seen some alligators like climb up walls like that.
Okay, Alligator Loki reminds me so much. I had a really close family friend. I call her my aunt. She's not actually my aunt, but she is my Aunt Mary for all intents and purposes. When I was a kid, she had a pet alligator named Kitty. Her name was Kitty. That thing freaked me the hell out, though.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the normal, natural reaction to an alligator as a pet?
Well, it wasn't. It was like a small one. It was maybe like 2 feet long, but still, like.
It's an alligator. They all start out small.
I don't know. I never knew what happened to that thing. I never knew what happened to Kitty.
Do you still know where Aunt is? Because maybe your aunt. Did Kitty have a moment like what happens to President Loki later?
Ironically, they moved to Florida recently, so.
She set Kitty free to be with her people.
But I do like how the one Loki who killed Thor was their leader. I do like that. I do like that little subtle thing.
And he had a throne.
Yeah. But he
had a throne in the bowling alley. He had a throne.
Mm-hmm.
So Sylvie wakes up in the void. Go ahead.
Wait. I don't know if this happens after or before Sylvie wakes up in the void. I also like how they all turn on President Loki.
I don't know. It all happens.
It was like right around the same time. It's right around the same time. I just know that they see President Loki. That might be when Sylvie wakes up in the void. So yeah, we can get to it.
And then Eliath is destroying everything. And then we see Mobius, and he's driving a vehicle that looks suspiciously like the Pizza Planet truck from Pixar.
Yes,
I agree 100%.
I noticed that yesterday when I was rewatching it. I was like, oh my God, that's the Pizza Planet truck.
I thought I was insane for saying that.
No, it absolutely felt like that, because it was like that old-fashioned, again, like 70s, 80s, like boxy-ish car that looks like it's probably not that safe to drive, which is exactly what a teenager from Pizza Planet
would. But it's also exactly what a teenager is driving in high school.
Yeah.
Except this truck has a giant pizza slice on it, not the little rocket.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the logo could have changed over time.
This is true. But it is owned by Disney. So I'm not.
It's all variants. It's a variant of the car. That's what it is. I think Pizza Planet renamed themselves at some point to just Pizza, and that was the Nexus event, so they had to zap the car.
I like this theory. I'm on board.
So this is where we get the scene between all of the various Lokis. I have a note that is referring to Loki with the fur, and it just makes me think of Low by Flow Rider.
I just love how over our Loki is. He's over all of the other Loki's bullshit. Sorry, Grandma. Bullcrap. While they're all fighting and turning on President Loki, our Loki's like in the corner with his arms crossed, like sighing. He's rolling his eyes. He's like, "Oh my God, this is what Thor feels like. This is so."
He's
dumb.
doing Matt Smith in House of the Dragon, just leaning. That's what his role is right now as Damon. He's a leaner.
So basically we learn that Loki with the fur betrayed them.
King Loki. No, I'm just calling him Kid Loki.
Kid Loki?
Kid Loki. I'm not calling him
He's Kid Loki.
Yeah.
And there's a fight sequence
where we have like a Robin Hood Loki, a Loki from like Mongolia, we have a samurai Loki, just every Loki imaginable.
And then there's this big, like, it almost looks like a naval ship of some kind that just like appears out of nowhere, and Elias eats it.
So I think Kid Loki can track I think he has his own temp pad where he can track when things are going to come.
So where did that naval ship come from is my point.
Some random place.
Well, I think it came from the same place as Pizza Planet truck. I think that we just learned that inanimate objects can also be pruned. That was actually supposed to be in the original movie Battleship. That was the ship.
Interesting.
Or, I mean, I think everything that gets pruned with the yellow grenades. Whatever the yellow grenade touches.
When the timeline's reset.
Yellow grenade.
Oh.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Oh.
Because that's the same energy as their pruning sticks.
Yeah.
Because it gets rid of everything that's not supposed to be there.
So you think
that makes sense.
Like every time that there's, when the hunters like set those little devices down, whatever is around them gets sent to the void then?
Whatever is part of the Nexus event.
Yep.
What caused
those people?
They were probably.
I don't know, but the people that Loki was talking to in the first episode probably got sent there.
Well,
or like the Titanic.
No, not the people. The people didn't get sent. Loki was the only one that got sent.
Yeah. I think it's the root cause.
After the yellow grenade thing went off.
I think it's the root cause, like you're saying. So if like the Titanic missed the iceberg, the Titanic would be sent, but not the people.
Yes. No, everything.
Because it's supposed to hit the iceberg.
But the people were there on the naval ship.
Everything would get sent.
I don't remember the people.
Everything would get sent. Whatever is part of the Nexus, or whatever was part of the Nexus event.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, the I don't remember where
because you can see there's a shot of like a group of guys like trying to get off the ship.
Yeah.
Like, and they don't make it.
Maybe the ship was supposed to explode or something, but didn't. And it looks like it just eats people. It doesn't eat objects.
Yeah.
Is what it looks like.
Editing Sarah here. So this episode is full of little Easter eggs, both real and fictional. And one of those being this naval ship that is USS Eldridge. Basically USS Eldridge is it's a World War II destroyer ship built to escort various naval convoys through the Mediterranean. It is at the center of a UFO hoax known as the Philadelphia experiment. I don't have the time to divulge every bit of information about the Philadelphia experiment, but just give it a little Google. It's quite interesting. But yeah, so that's what that ship basically is.
So then Sylvia and Mobius find them in the Pizza Planet truck.
Sylvia and Mobius are having like a heart-to-heart in the Pizza Planet truck. And the conversation they're having is like giving me Harry Potter for the greater good vibes. And I don't like it.
Well, I think they're both at the point where they now both trust Loki. And so it's the whole idea of like whatever he has to do or whatever y'all have to do, it's going to have to be the only option.
Loki is so relieved to see both Sylvie and Mobius, and it's so cute.
Oh, one thing we didn't talk about though, when Sylvie first arrives, is the first time she enchants the Goliath a little bit before she meets up with Mobius. That was where she kind of figured out that there is something to the Goliath that a Loki could, in fact, try to control. And I think that's also where that heart-to-heart kind of conversation comes into play a lot. Is like, we have to somehow, this beast can be tamed. We just need to figure out what that looks like.
So she decides that she's going to enchant Elias to try to like stop it from destroying everything, I guess.
And for another Disney reference, when I was rewatching, I got like Wendy and the Lost Boys vibes from Sylvie and all the Lokis. I just was like, this is Wendy and the Lost Boys. They're in Neverland, and she's like, you can't just kill Elias. You can't paper cut it to death. You got to do something smarter than that. One of my favorite stories, and I share a birthday with J.M. Barrie, the author of Peter Pan. So
I always love seeing who I share a birthday with. I share a birthday with Evan Rachel Wood, which is awesome.
Oh.
And Queen Elizabeth I.
I share a birthday with Charlie Sheen. Lucky me.
Winning.
Do you share a birthday with anyone?
I share a birthday with Tina Fey.
Tina Fey. Oh.
That's cool.
I share a birthday with Tina Fey, George Strait.
Oh, I also share a birthday with Eazy-E, the guy from NWA. B-15 is locked in a cell for being disloyal, and we get this really sweet scene between Loki and Sylvie. And what is their ship name, Frances?
Silky, and this is one of my favorite scenes of the whole show, and it's so cute. They're like sweet little babies with crushes. I love it. They're so cute.
He magics a little blanket, and then she like says something about like how her outfit's really uncomfortable, and I'm like, why can't you just magic a new one?
Damn, she just like ruined my whole Tonks vibe that we said in the last episode about the haircut.
There's so much character development in this scene for Loki, and I love it.
On both sides. Both of them.
Yes.
I love it. It's one of my favorite things. One of the reasons that I like love Loki and Sylvie so much is I read an article that came out after the finale last year, and it's about like the romantically inexperienced trope. And I myself am chronically single and romantically inexperienced, in that I haven't had like a long-term serious partner. And so I'll send you the link for this article, but it's talking about how it ultimately Loki doesn't portray Sylvie, who's the romantically inexperienced character, as like a broken character like most media does with a romantically inexperienced character. Sylvie is really strong, and she's desirable, and she is independent, and it's a really great article. And I was like, yes. One of my favorite quotes is, Sylvie's characterization in Loki provides a fresh take on the matter. She's the complete opposite of naive, and it is actually her world weariness that's standing between her and a healthy relationship with another person. And even though she may be awkward when it comes to talking about her feelings, she is completely confident and capable when it comes to survival skills, and can certainly hold her own in a sword fight. And so it's turning a very common trope on its head by Loki and Sylvie are both romantically inexperienced, but they're both portrayed as these really strong, independent characters who, while they both want to have that experience, they don't know how, but it's not seen as a defect. And I think that's a really cool take on that trope.
Oh, for sure. I really like how this show could really go harder in the romance department if they wanted to. And I really kind of appreciated that this show was not... Yes, the romance is there, obviously. But
it's not the focus, though.
It's not the focus. And I really, like... I have nothing against... I have nothing against, like, romance subplots, but it's just... Sometimes shows can get a little bogged down by romantic relationships. And I don't think it's entirely necessary to any of these characters, really. But it's nice to get sprinklings of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's also just in general, I think the thing that they're developing is Loki's abilities to develop relationships with anyone. because I think that kind of leads us into like the next scene, which honestly was the most one that resonated with me the most, is classic Loki looks ridiculous, right? Everyone can agree his costume is absolutely ridiculous. And everyone
He
else
looks
has
like a
said
spirit Halloween costume.
he does, absolutely. It's the same thing as WandaVision and Vision wearing the old-fashioned costumes also, right? Like, but he just looks, he's old, obviously. He's also, at the same time, he's wearing this really dorky outfit. But he's also the only Loki that showed up for them also. And that is a huge thing to see that, like, I mean, the fact that they created a Loki community in itself kind of tells you that this is possible to develop. But that loyalty towards, like, this impossible challenge, and I feel like all of them always trying to pursue Midgard and take over the world and all those kinds of things kind of echoes this whole idea of chasing the impossible. And I think that that's kind of what we see is like in a way they've made this kind of pact together in this under this blanket of, hey, we're going to be in this together no matter what happens, right? And like they're on each other's side, but then all of a sudden friendship still shows up. Like we already saw Mobius show up at one point, and he has a time pad and all that stuff. And then at the same time, we've seen this community being created. Like they are solo people, but then all of a sudden we're seeing them in this integrated environment where now they are a community who is going to pursue this and keep true still to their values. Like I think while this guy's able to create an Asgard, right, that completely distracts the Goliath and gives them the opportunity to do this, like the reality is like he looks like the most feeble of all these Lokis, and yet he is easily the most powerful in that moment. Like if he probably would have grabbed Goliath, he would have been fine. They could have probably made it in without him creating this Asgard. They didn't really know what they were going to do, but yeah. And so like I just think that this whole thing is this whole idea of like community kind of is why this episode to me is also again so cool, because it's like all these different personalities that are working towards this common good and finding out that like if you work together, as cliche as it sounds, you're not alone. You're not by yourself, you know?
It is a little bit of a found family kind of situation as well.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yeah. I really love, I have to mention the little peacock bird things.
Yeah, what are those?
They were very, things that would appear in Newt Scamander's suitcase to me.
Yes, 100%.
Or it's the things that you'll see around a watering hole for a lion, like an actual lion, is they always have those little birds around the watering hole too that somehow are able to be symbiotic relationships.
I just love that they don't really have heads. They just have little balls, like that are little floating balls for heads. He decides to stay with Sylvie no matter what, which is really sweet. And then Kid Loki gives him his dagger.
Or gives him a dagger. I think that was from his world, from his universe. Because his dagger can be set on fire, and Loki's never could do that.
And he conjures like a little like holster for his dagger with little suspenders.
Just makes him hotter, let's be real.
I can't say I disagree.
Because Loki has different powers, it looks like. Like Loki, like our Loki can change his appearance, which we've seen him do when he turned himself into Odin and Captain America and a bunch of other people. But Sylvie's is more like controlling other people, while classic Loki can conjure up images, it looks like.
Or I still think that there's a possibility that they could all have all of them. No, but I just think that they're each put into a situation and they develop a skill based off of which situation they're put into. Because Sylvie's able to also do the imagery of where changing her personality into somebody else. And then I actually think that they can probably conjure up a whole realities if they needed to. I just think that, again, they are only... I think that's kind of the question, right?
Yeah, they only need to use their powers that they know that they have.
And they don't develop the other ones because they don't know that they should know about those.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So I think that there's a possibility that they could be the most powerful, like, kind of sorcerer, enchantress, whatever, in the entire MCU. I just think that it's kind of like, what's her name? Jean Grey doesn't really realize how strong she is, or Wanda doesn't realize how strong she is until forced to address that stuff.
I think Jean Grey is the strongest being in the Marvel universe.
Is that Sophie Turner's character
She
in
is.
X-Men? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, with Phoenix Force.
Yeah, but they've confirmed in the MCU proper, Captain Marvel is the strongest Avenger.
Yeah, we really didn't like Captain Marvel.
I am upset about that.
So Mobius goes back to the TVA. They have to make a distraction, so classic Loki comes in and conjures Asgard. And then Elias eats it.
Is this going to be the last shot we ever get of Asgard as we know it? Because I feel like it might be. I realized that when I was watching this.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we see...
Because we see it destroyed in Ragnarok.
Yeah.
But Ragnarok's before this, isn't it?
No, that's what I'm saying, yeah. So this would be the last this would be the last shot of Asgard. Is that because we've already seen Ragnarok in a timeline, then this is the last shot of Asgard, because New Asgard does not look anything like Asgard.
I mean, Asgard's not a place, it's a person.
Ah.
And then, so, their magic destroys Elias.
Or it doesn't destroy, it opens the portal.
It opens, yeah. And the smoke clears and reveals some kind of building, and that's the end of season 5, episode 5.
In some of the previous scenes, you can actually see that castle at the end of that, too. They have found it frozen in frames that you can see a shape of it. So it was something that they'd actually called out early on as, like, there is something in that Lyeth that they didn't even have to go into the details. Like, that was an Easter egg a lot of people found.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And also in this scene is where you see, or right before this is where you see the Dark Ether ship.
The Dark Elf?
No.
Or is it like the donut ship?
Ronin ship.
The one that looks like a bird?
We see a giant Ant-Man or a giant wasp, or
Wasp.
Yellow Jacket helmet.
Yeah.
And a Living Tribunal head, which in the comics, the Living Tribunals protect the timeline. So they will kill people who try to protect the timeline that's not the TVA, also, apparently.
Good call out.
I think with the Living Tribunals, that will be an interesting thing if they do explore that. I mean, we've been introduced to the Celestials now, with Eternals.
I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't... Not my movie.
Eye roll.
Yeah.
Not my movie.
That's the only good thing. That was the only good thing in Eternals, in my opinion, was the Celestials. That they
Except for they don't explain them. They don't explain the one that's in the middle of the ocean.
Episode 6 is called For All Time and Always.
I love...
Which makes you think of Snape, right?
Uh-huh, that's exactly why I whispered it.
In real time between episodes 5 and 6, there was like so much uncertainty heading into it. And it was like, it was in a way, it was kind of like the Mephisto madness from WandaVision, because it was like, how can they end this show? We've got one episode left. They're not going to bring in Kang with one episode left. That'd be way, that breaks all the storytelling rules, since the beginning
on a TV show too.
Yeah. They were like, we know we're getting Kang and Ant-Man, like, it would make sense, but it would break every storytelling rule. Like, there's no way they can do this. And they did it. They broke all the storytelling rules.
But it was also the one that all the breadcrumbs. It was the one that all the breadcrumbs did point to. Like, if you look at the Easter eggs, like, they called out King the Conqueror as who they thought was going to be the big bad that was going to be at the end of this whole thing. But at the same point, they were like, the shows, WandaVision did pretty well, successful. Falcon Winter Soldier had a little bit less positive response to it, actually, just because it kind of is more of a circular timeline, like nothing truly happens in it. And the concept of and kind of WandaVision too, nothing truly really happened in it that much, right? The concept of introducing Phase 5 and 6 big bad in a TV show on Disney Plus behind a paywall, forcing people to look at this, was like something that everyone was like, everything seems to point to Kang, but why would Kang be in a TV show in the last episode where we don't even really know him?
Well, we really don't even see the true evil Kang. We see the one that's good. That's the thing.
Only because we don't know that there are evil ones.
I find this conversation really interesting because, like, his mom is, like, a big MCU fan, but she hasn't seen any of the Disney Plus shows.
Exactly.
But I feel like she's gonna have to because of the future movies.
That's like the newest.
This is the only one.
The newest discussion is: are you going to have to see the TV shows to start enjoying the movies? And I think Loki is like the real.
I think Loki's the only
Yes.
one.
His mom is
Yeah.
also in the camp of like, it should have ended with Endgame.
Paul believed that. So my boyfriend Paul, he says he could have died after Endgame and been happy. Just basically, he felt like that had a good enough ending for him to have
He literally
been okay
jokes.
with it.
He literally jokes every time a new trailer comes out. He's like, "I can't die yet. I got to know what happened."
Yeah, that's his new thing. It's like he would have been fine, but the whole thing is like I will say that WandaVision I do think was homework prior to going and seeing Multiverse of Madness. Otherwise, you won't
Yeah.
understand most of some of the motivations of characters in that.
Yeah.
But at the same
Especially
time,
when
I would
you
say
think
that
about it.
Loki, seeing He Who Remains, which happens in the first part of this, is imperative for the rest of the phases.
So
Not to mention,
the-
Kevin Feige has confirmed that Sylvie and Loki are the ones who break the sacred
The timeline.
timeline and open the multiverse. So I
Yeah,
think
so. We can blame Sylvie and Loki for everything that's going to happen going forward.
Yes.
We can blame them.
It goes back to that quote that Matthew, you were saying about Miss Minutes in that first quote is another multi-dimensional war.
Yeah.
That
There
is
was
what
already
we're heading
before
towards.
That He Who Remains, Kang, was the last living person, I think, of this universe, and so he created the TVA to protect it so that there wouldn't be another one.
So the
And-
logo for this episode, it suddenly has sound.
It's all the
so
different.
good.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
it was really,
it's-
really good.
Captain America's dance with Peggy, and it goes through like all these big quotes from the MCU to date, and it ends with the Vision quote from WandaVision. What is grief if not love persevering? And it's just like I get chills every time I watch this episode because of this part.
But
Yeah.
He Who Remains created Miss Minutes.
Is Miss Minutes still is she still so innocent for you?
You're starting to
Are you-
convince me.
I
Are you
don't think
still a
Miss
stan?
Minutes is evil. I don't think
I
Miss-
do love her. I think she's cute.
I don't think Miss Minutes is evil, technically. I don't think she is because she's just doing what her creator is telling her to do.
Just wait. I have a note.
Her
in a minute
creator?
about Miss Minutes.
Her creator
Is-
who puts her in the TVA to like say these very maniacal sounding videos that are very dark in actual purpose.
She's
Then she
announcing.
says
Yeah.
she's announcing the fact that there's a multi-dimensional war that she's preventing. Like I said, she acts
So,
like she's got all these files
talking
just so
to her.
innocently.
So,
He just talks through her.
we basically are told about like the Big Bang and the Citadel at the end of time. Which, first of all, Citadel is not a word I've ever heard outside of Game of Thrones.
It's also a university in South Carolina that is a military base. So
I've never heard of that word outside of Game of Thrones. It's a word that they
Basically,
use
it's just
all
like
the
a-
time.
Basically, it just means like fortress.
fortress.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yep.
anxious.
Sure,
to see,
I get that.
I'm anxious to see if it
Fancy.
shows up any other in the future. Like, are we going to revisit it? Because it's like it's so pretty on the inside.
It's just such a specific word.
I don't think
It is.
we may see the Citadel again in Loki season 2, maybe?
And then we are jump scared by Miss Minutes.
Good God! Watching this in the pitch black dark at 5 a.m., I nearly jumped out of my skin.
I mean, it was probably worse than
So
Loki.
innocent. So innocent here.
I'm not saying she's innocent by any means of the imagination, but I don't think she's
Okay.
truly. I mean, just like what Loki said, no one is truly evil or truly good.
And she is manipulating him hard.
No, so she.
Oh,
is
another
repeating
great
what
characteristic for a very nice person.
I mean, that's the thing. Kang is willing to change the timeline to help them out, to keep the.
Hey,
peace.
Matthew, I'll make a bet with you.
Okay, what's the bet?
If Miss Minutes ends up being ultimately evil, like definitively evil, you have to give Miss Minutes tattoo And if she ends up being definitively good, I'll get a Miss Minutes tattoo.
Deal.
This is
Everyone-
awesome.
Deal.
Keep it in. Keep it in.
I'm good. I'm fine with this being a absolute.
We have to wait a year. We just have to wait a year to find out.
Potentially 2. Who knows if she's gonna show up in the.
We'll insert this clip in a future episode.
No, I think
with some sort of recording of one of us getting a tattoo, like some sort of filming of oh god, that kind of thing.
It will be on our Patreon.
Love it.
The cinematography in this episode is really cool. I really like it.
Yeah.
And then He Who Remains, which that name sounds a little familiar.
I was gonna say
always.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you get 3 Harry Potter nerds in a room. I'm sorry.
It's gonna happen. When Miss Minutes is talking to Loki and Sylvie and like, you can still rule Earth, like you can both be on the timeline. This, to me, like Loki's already changed, and while that may still feel like enticing to him, he's already like changed fundamentally, and I think Sylvie also has too. Like killing Thanos, I'm sure. Thanos probably sounds really enticing, but I think this is just another example of people not thinking Loki is capable of change. And so,
I just see this as a fake offer, right?
Yeah.
Like, guys, Miss Minutes is evil for one. 2, if this is even a possibility, if this is the sacred timeline, then he wouldn't have died in Infinity War, which is what they've told him is okay, because Infinity War leads to Endgame, and Endgame, even though there is time travel, is part of the sacred timeline. So, again, that means that the Tesseract falling at his feet would be part of the sacred timeline as well, getting him to this point. Exactly. Like, the whole idea, though, is that it can't go back. Like, it can't. That's not an offer. Because otherwise, when they do meet He Who Remains, that would have been another stack. They would have had to almost say, "Oh, you broke the timeline again."
I don't think so, because he can change the timeline, though.
Except for the end.
What's going to happen? So he can change. So if Loki agreed to go back, he would have changed the timeline to make it so that Loki wouldn't be a variant and be able to do whatever he wanted.
But what happened to the other Loki then?
That's the thing. I think he would go back, and Loki would not have died on that ship. I don't think. But
then he wouldn't have beat Thanos.
But he would have the knowledge of his own death to prevent it. So he would be able to do something else to kill Thanos instead of lying and getting his neck snapped. He has the upper hand in that case.
Yes.
And he knows what Infinity Stones he needs, because he learned what each Infinity Stone color was, so he would be able to find it a lot easier.
Sylvie figures out that she can't hurt. I was about to call him He Who Must Not Be Named. That's not his name. And her and Loki are very much still on guard.
Because he knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, this brings actually a question. Is there such thing as free will? Or is everything pre-planned for you?
I think this is actually a concept that they actually they position in a way that, I guess, if we go back to what Matthew was just saying about what He Who Remains writes, I actually think that's kind of what he ultimately offers them, is free will. Is that he's the one that's controlling free will.
Yeah. By
figuring out a way to write something. So if his writing is free will, and he hasn't written past that point, that is where free will exists, but like time, if it's harnessed, it can be controlled.
Yeah. Controlled and manipulated.
And then Mobius goes to see Renslayer. More vibes. And then we go
to... Ow, chicka wow wow!
Renslayer disappears and says, I need to find whoever's in charge. But the Tempats can't go to the Void.
Although they can be used in the Void.
I feel like there's probably another Kang somewhere that she's in cahoots with.
He Who Remains has a temp pad.
Because
he has one in the Void.
The Tempats
right,
is
and then
the device from the future. It's a future.
Mobius had one too. Yeah, but Mobius had one too. Right, I'm just saying, I think it can be used.
You can't get into the void, but you can lock onto a point to get out of the void. Because he had his TemPad on him when he got pruned.
Do we think He Who Remains was pruned?
No, he created the TVA. Because he created Eliath. He created Eliath. He created...
So he's just been waiting there.
Yes. Because he's at the edge of time.
Right.
What's past him is the start of the new time. The next Big Bang. So he's out of time just like the void. That's why he doesn't age. He's been alive for eons and eons and eons. He's older than the Watcher, essentially, at this point. The Watcher and the Celestials and Ego and all of them. Kang is technically the oldest living being at this time.
We go to Fremont, Ohio in 2018, and we're in a school, and we see Renslayer.
What's most important to me about this is she's a vice principal. She's not in control still. She still serves there's still someone higher.
What's the Nexus event here, though?
I don't think there was one. I think Kang just plucked her. Because she and Mobius were both taken by He Who Remains. So I think they were one of the first.
And Renslayer is, like, super in denial about all of it.
Mm-hmm. Because she's like, there has to be a purpose to what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. And he just throws the pin down from her old school. So she knows her past. She knows what has happened in her past. Because otherwise, why would she freak out about that pin when she sees it? So she knows. That's why I don't think she was...
Or is it like jet skis? And his weird affiliation to jet skis? Like, is there something that primes them?
Hers was more of fear. Like, she knew it. His is more like he just wants to own one. Hers was, it seemed a lot more, she was running away from something, is what hers seemed like. Which I could be reading too far into that. But it is MCU, and you can't really read too far into something.
Yeah.
And the finale.
Yeah. So there's a scene where He Who Remains is explaining the multiversal war, and there's this little orb on his desk that's like morphing into...
No, he's controlling it with his TemPad.
Yeah.
He's making all those images.
It reminds me of the intro to Black Panther a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Where, like, you know, all the figures are kind of like,
sand. Yeah.
Sand,
like,
yeah.
It reminds me of Venom.
Yes. Sarah hasn't seen Venom.
I haven't either.
It's on the Patreon
list.
Is
really, really
But
funny.
Kate, you've seen Spider-Man 3, haven't you?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of vibe.
Oh, I know. I've seen the original. Yeah. So
I was just talking about like the black goo. I don't mean specifically
the putty stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
But Venom is really, really.
Venom is funny.
It's a lot funnier than a Marvel movie should be.
The He Who Remains basically is explaining that he weaponized Eliath to end the multiverse war.
Because he created Eliath from all of the energy from the multiversal war, which is smart.
And he explains that the TVA was formed to keep everything straight.
So that the other Kangs don't attack again. Because Kangs are always evil. There's never a good Kang until now.
I think that if he's someone who has harnessed free will, that would be seen as a universally bad decision. Yeah. So he has just figured out a way to remain. But at the same time, it is also where, yes, I agree, though, that for the most part, Kangs are universally in a fight against each other that creates mass chaos for everybody else, too.
Yeah, that's just mass chaos is putting it lightly.
Basically, the timeline is branching. And there is a shot, I'm not sure if it's now or later, but there's a shot of B-15 and a couple of the other characters looking at the screen in the TVA where, like, you see all
That's later. So, Loki and Sylvie start fighting because the timeline is over. Kang doesn't know, or He Who Remains.
They cross that threshold.
When they started, I was convinced when they started arguing that this was, like, their plan, his plan all along to get them to turn on each other.
No. At this point, he doesn't know what's going to happen.
Question. The actor who plays He Who Remains King the Conqueror is Jonathan Majors. Where is he from? He is from Duncanville, Texas. He graduated from Duncanville High School. He was in that show on HBO, the other virtual reality thing with, oh crap, I can't think of it right now. Lovecraft. But fun fact, he's from the same area of Texas that we all are from, in Dallas-Fort Worth area. So he went to Duncanville High School, Cedar Hill area. So he is one of us.
Fun. Yeah,
he knows what Whataburger is.
Yeah, Duncanville is far south Dallas.
Right.
Yeah.
But
so basically
Jonathan Majors is killing it too.
Yeah.
He wants Loki and Sylvie to take over.
And Loki is not having it. He's like, nope, this is not the vibe, Sylvie. We're not gonna do that. And
he asks Sylvie to pause and think, and she thinks it's a con.
Yeah. And he says one of the
most
heartbreaking things I've ever heard uttered out of Loki's mouth, which is because you can't trust and I can't be trusted, and it breaks my little silky loving heart.
But at the same time, it's Miss Minute's fault with Ramona Renslayer that like faked it in front of her, even though they shook hands and stuff like that. Like the fact that she was taken as a child, like again, it's kind of the same question I had with when the Tesseract ended up at Loki's feet. Do we really think that Loki of any variant would just leave it there to protect that sacred timeline? I still don't believe that there's any world in reality
I think
where he would leave it.
I think Loki was meant to take it.
But then Infinity War and Endgame could have never happened.
Yeah.
So is all this stuff supposed to be happening actually in that little time frame? Is that actually Infinity War and Endgame are the end, and now we're starting this whole thing that's actually a prequel to those? Because that's the only way that would work, because we have to have Loki show up in Ragnarok, and Ragnarok to happen in order for Endgame and Infinity War to happen on the sacred timeline.
Yeah. I think it still happens because when Tony Stark and Ant-Man messed up with getting the Tesseract, Tony and Cap went to 1970s New Jersey, I think, to get the other Tesseract. So I think they still
But it's Thor. How do you get Thor without Loki dying?
No, I still think in the normal timeline, Loki stays because they got the Tesseract from a different place again. So I think they corrected the timeline where Loki.
Then why would this be a variant?
Because he still messed up the timeline even for a split second. He still messed it up.
I think that if they went back even further to get the Tesseract, then that would completely void this from even ever happening. By that action, by getting the Tesseract at that point, it voids it. And so that's the whole thing, is like, this whole concept I still go back to is like, I don't trust these people at all. And so I can understand why Sylvie doesn't trust them. I can understand that if it's within their actual nature to do this stuff, then Sylvie would ultimately do what she does, which is not take the option of that He Who Remains offers, which is to let it be.
But with normal time loop movies and stories, Loki would have disappeared every time.
Exactly. So how did he show up in Ragnarok?
I think because when they went back to 1970, they erased the 2012 issue. They erased.
So then the 2012 issue creates this show, and this show shouldn't exist.
And then Frances' dreams come true, and we get the silky kiss.
Can we talk about how he tells her to stop, and the music for this scene is called Stop? Please. I love it. It's so good. It's great.
They finally kiss.
He speaks so gently to her the whole time, and it's just like, he loves her so much.
such a really interesting juxtaposition because Loki in previous iterations has been, when he speaks, he kind of speaks kind of harshly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting to hear him speak to Sylvie that he always speaks to her in such a gentle tone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I think he talks to her that way because he wishes people would talk to him that way.
It's a good
All right,
argument.
real question. Do we even think it's possible for the two of them to manage the TVA?
No.
Oh, of course not.
No.
Why are we thinking that this is an actual offer?
It's not.
Miss Minutes, He Who Remains, all these people are not making realistic thoughts. Like, if they were the hiring manager, they would definitely not hire these two people to be the managing partners of the TVA. Miss Minutes is HR for the TVA. And so we know that by that definition, Miss Minutes is probably evil because she fires and hires people. And for some reason, her being the voice of He Who Remains believes that there is a possibility that these two people would be very qualified to run the TVA.
I also think that He Who Remains is just tired and is like, you know what would be fun? Another multiversal war. Let's do it.
He's just bored.
I think he is. Because he did say he's tired of protecting the timeline and he wants someone else to do it.
Yeah.
He's just a glutton for chaos.
I love the mania. He seems very manic. I love that about how Jonathan Majors portrays him. But at the same time, I also love the purple outfit. He looks fantastic in purple.
He does have a great cloak. It reminded me a little bit of how, maybe this is a weird jump, but in Goblet of Fire, when we first meet Voldemort in his like full form,
he says,
and
"Robe me."
The robe is like almost its own character.
Yeah.
A little bit. The way that it moves. And maybe that's dramatic to say, but that's like kind of what it reminded me of a little bit. The way that He Who Remains just kind of like waltzes through a room.
That apple is definitely a paid actor.
So Sylvie pushes Loki through the doorway to the TVA, and I refer to this little device as a coaster because that's what it looks like to me. She like uses the little coaster thing to open the door and then stabs He Who Remains. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, the timeline breaks off into a million pieces.
Because the one protector of it can't protect it anymore.
And then Loki goes to find Mobius, and he looks up, and the statues are gone except for one.
The statues are all Kang. So a different Kang, an evil Kang, took over.
And that's the end of Loki.
And everyone is sad. Loki is sad. Sylvie is sad. Loki is horrified to find the Kang statue. It's very sad. And
Mobius doesn't recognize him too.
Because he's in a different TVA. It's horrible.
Yeah. And funny thing that I saw, if you remember the receptionist that took Loki around, the one that didn't know what a fish was, is a hunter now.
Oh,
yeah,
I didn't see that.
He's a series regular in season 2. This is the first Disney Plus show that's getting season 2.
I think it's like Hunter D something. I don't remember his number. But he's a hunter now. But Kang's outfit, like, part of his suit or part of his costume is from Mongolia, like 15th century. Another part is from like Japan, 16th, and then I think his shoes or something are like 17th century Italian or something.
I love costume design.
So he has a piece of costume from each century.
That is great fun.
I don't remember.
It's awesome. I just think it's also how it moves on his body is very also mesmerizing. I think that's the way that like I can honestly, when I like recall this even before like rewatching it, I just was like, yo, Jonathan Majors is the perfect cast, you know, because there are those moments where you're like, it's like the idea of like we talked about this with Mephisto. If they don't cast the right Mephisto, we have been so primed to seeing Mephisto now that if it's not perfect, it's going to piss off a ton of people.
Honestly,
Kang the Conqueror.
You don't think we're going to see Mephisto?
I don't think we will.
I really kind of wish they went there in WandaVision, honestly.
I did too.
I'm glad we didn't. Like,
I did too.
Mephisto, I think it would have been too easy to explain if it was Mephisto. I think that would have been too easy of an explanation that Mephisto is behind it all. Would have been too easy.
No, I know, and I know that's not really necessarily what they were going for. It would have been an interesting plot twist.
Because Mephisto would be, like, I think a saga big bad, not a movie big bad. Because he is literally the Marvel devil. Which I don't think he would be a big bad in just one thing.
What do you think is going to happen in season 2?
Miss Minutes is going to take over the world.
As long as there's no more jump scares.
I don't think we're going to see Miss Minutes in season 2 because He Who Remains created her.
I think it'll primarily focus on Loki trying to find Sylvie.
Yeah.
And
probably.
I really
And
think
an uprising,
the fact
probably.
that... Well, and I think that it'll be something where everyone else, or the uprising's happening at the same time and he doesn't care. He's just trying to find her because he seems so one-dimensional in what he pursues. Like, he always kind of sets one goal and he works towards that. And I think that will still be something that he retains even with this. But Sylvie's now the thing he's obsessed with.
Yeah. So, final thoughts on Loki? What are your final thoughts?
My favorite show.
I think it's the best. I think it's the best of all the Marvel TV shows. I know that y'all have talked about that. I kind of tried to save it till the end. I've been recently rewatching Doctor Who, or watching it for the first time. Let me take that back. And I actually think that the concepts of Nexus events and in general time travel is so challenging because I think it kind of goes back to even some of the how does this work conversations that we've had throughout this recording. I think they did such a good job of that to make you kind of, if there are loopholes, because there are a couple, obviously, we've talked through a couple of them, they aren't so annoying. Like, I do think Ralph Boner's completely annoying, right? At the end of the day, the payoff was not as good as what it could have been. And I say the same thing about how horrible Wyatt Russell made John Walker. And even just honestly, all the times that now Julia Louis-Dreyfus has shown up, it's really just, I'm not that curious because I don't really like John Walker, right? Like, his evil outweighed it. However,
is there anyone out
character...
there that likes John Walker? That's the real question.
No.
Please write into the mailbag. They need to hear this. But no, I just think that's the whole thing about this is like every ancillary character I am actually still interested in. And that's what makes this show so well-rounded. And it makes me really excited about the fact that they're doing a season 2. I don't feel like that's an evil. It does seem like it's a big ask for them because the audience did respond so well. So kind of just hope they don't mess it up.
And I think, frankly, binging it all in, we binged it in probably 2 or 3 days. And I think it almost did us a disservice. I feel like I wish I had the suspense building between episodes. And I think it really, I miss consuming content the way that it's supposed to be consumed and kind of let your fan theories run wild kind of media. I missed that. And I haven't had that in a really long time. So I'm excited to catch up and get where everybody else is.
I initially didn't think Loki stuck the landing. I think this was a big conversation early on about the Marvel shows not feeling like they stuck the landing. Like Kate alluded to, some of the things didn't pay off. But every time I've rewatched it, I've liked it more and more. Like, I feel like the going off of, every stereotypical storyline of this is how you have to finish a story. You can't introduce a brand new character in the last chapter. I think the more I have rewatched it, every time it gets better and it makes more sense. And it just gets me excited for where the MCU is going in these next few phases. And, February's around the corner. We just got another Quantum Mania trailer. Like, I'm so excited to get to where we're, kind of caught up from how the pandemic shifted the phase 4 schedule. We're going to get caught up and be back kind of where we are supposed to be with the original planning. And so I'm just like I said, every time I rewatch it, it just gets better and it's more exciting. And it's clear that even the wrench that the pandemic threw into Kevin Feige's great plan, you know, it may end up, you know, somehow being better with the shuffling that they've had to do. Although I am still upset that they were supposed to have America Chavez in Spider-Man and had to write her out or something because of how they reshuffled Doctor Strange.
I really like the TV shows because they can put in a lot more into them instead of trying to cram. They can cram, like, for WandaVision, they would have had to cut out a lot of it.
I don't think WandaVision would have worked as a movie.
Or even like Falcon and Winter Soldier would not have worked as a movie. Because they would have had to cut out a lot of stuff.
I think more adaptations in the future are going to go the way of TV shows and not... Because we have seen it time and time again with adaptations really selling itself short. Because,
like, for example, What If would not be able to be a movie. But we are getting a Marvel Zombies movie, which I am really looking forward to.
All right, so that is the end of Loki week. Next week we will be covering Hawkeye, which, again, another whiplash. It'll be fun. Thank you, Frances and Kait. We really appreciate y'all being here this week. And
thanks for having us. We had a great time. I will.
We'll be back if you want
to rewatch Loki.
So we really appreciate y'all being here. And come back anytime.
Of course, we'd love to.
All right. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye.
If you'd like to send us any feedback or messages, you can follow us on Instagram at thefanclub_podcast, follow us on Twitter at fanclub_podcast, and chat with us over on reddit.com/r/fanclubpodcast. And don't forget to tune in every Marvel Monday. See you next time. Bye.